Okay, so well, let me tell you a little bit about this car. How I came across this car was very interesting. I was racing in Europe in both the Ferrari F1 Cliente and in the Masters, Formula One Historics, and in the Formula Juniors. And as I was racing through Europe, I was looking at, I wanted a competitive car in each one of these different venues. And when I looked at the pre-61 class of Formula One race cars, there were two cars winning every year. One of them was a Ferrari Dino, which I approached the owner and tried to buy it, and he still to this day won't sell it. But the car that kept beating him, though, the two of them were neck and neck a lot, but the guy who kept winning was a guy named Julian Bronson, who basically was driving a Scarab. And as I approached him, I started asking him about this car when I realized it was the first ever American Formula One car. Of course, that caught my attention going, wow, okay, now I really got to have one of these. And he told me, well, the problem is there's only 3 in the world, only 2 that were ever raced in period. The third one being what he was racing. Julian Bronson was racing the car that was built but never finished, being introduced into the series because they switched from front engine to rear engine. And at that time, that his third car.
Now they changed the front engine to rear engine in what, 64, 63?
No, 1960. So it was a transfer in 19.
Okay.
Yeah, 58, 59, and then I think it was 60 that they used the front engines, and 61 they switched to the rear engines, or it was 60 or 61. I'd have to look to be exactly sure. But so this car, which was raced extensively, it was raced by Chuck Day and by Lance Reventlow. And for those who just really briefly want to understand the story, Lance Reventlow was the son of the heiress Barbara Hutton from the Woolworth fortune. And she gave her son a very large sum of money for, I think it was his 25th birthday or something like that, as the story goes. And he was a playboy. He was like the, think of the most playboy kind of guy in the world back in the late 1950s, wanted to be a race car driver. So he started his own company in Los Angeles called Scarab. And what he did is he built 3 Formula One cars and I think 6 GT cars. And out of the 3 Formula One cars, he himself raced this car. This is one of the 2 that raced.
Is this number 1 or number 2?
This is number 2. Number 1 is the one that was owned by Chuck Day, not by Chuck Day, by Don Orozco, who recently passed away. He owned the number 1 car. This is the number 2 car. And this particular car was raced in several races around the world, including the Monaco Grand Prix. And that's where the Sterling Moss scenario comes in. So being the very wealthy playboy and very famous, when Lance Reventlow entered the Scarab in the Monaco Grand Prix that year, he went up to Sterling Moss for Friday practice and said, look, I know that, you're driving for somebody else, all that, but I really would love your opinion. Would you take my car out on Friday practice, drive it and give me your opinion? And there's an interview by Sterling Moss, which I'll send you, and a photograph of him driving this car in Monaco. You can see the photograph, but there's also an online interview with Sterling Moss talking about driving the Scarab, which the car itself in period wasn't competitive. And they finally realized there was an issue with the engine that was later resolved. And then it became extremely competitive in the historic races. But this car has raced also in Goodwood. It's got a great pedigree.
Now I was going to ask you about that. Did you drive it in Goodwood?
I did not. I didn't drive it at Goodwood. It was driven in Goodwood. I think it was 2000. Maybe it was 2008, because it should be on the car. You see the sticker there, but it's been driven in historic events. And then the car, when I found it, because I went searching for this car all over, I found it in Riverside, which is where Lance Reventlow and Carroll Shelby and all these guys did all their racing out at the Riverside Raceway. And they had a museum there, and the car was in that museum for several years. And I bought it from the owner right from the museum where it was on display. My intent was to race the car in Europe, and had gotten it, in my museum, and it was such a lovely piece. And then I got to that point where I sort of backed away from racing and said, I'm not going to race anymore. So I just kept it as a beautiful showpiece, because it also has one really unique thing that none of the other scarabs have. It is the only one that still has the original Desmodromic engine that was built in Los Angeles, was built for the race car in period that it was raced with. The other two cars don't have that engine, and it's still in full operating condition, race ready. And when the car was restored, because like all these race cars, it was crashed more than once, I think, but it was professionally restored, and the restoration was done, and I think it was supervised, but certainly included many of the team members who built the car originally, as well as Phil Remington, who's now much more famous after people realized he was the engineering powerhouse behind the GT40 and the Shelby Cobras and the Shelby Daytonas. He was involved in all of that. He was Shelby's right-hand man, but he actually came from working on the Scarabs. And as you look under the hood, you'll see his signature along with everybody else's who did the professional restoration on this car. So just a stunning piece. And as a race car driver, my only regret is I never took it out on the track because I stopped racing before I had the chance to.